Can you guys introduce Mommy?
Spill the beans with Dr. Jill.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's episode of Spill the Beans with Dr. Jill. As always, I brought us a great visitor to our space who's going to enlighten us a little bit about what they know about vicarious trauma or what they don't know and the intersection of the work that they do. So, would love to take the opportunity to have him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Raul Fernandez. I'm a faculty member at Boston University, and I also run a nonprofit called Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity.
Awesome. How long have you been in higher ed?
It's been over 2 decades. My first stint in higher ed was actually working in media relations, and then I made the switch over to student affairs. I worked in student affairs for a decade, and then have been on the faculty for another decade.
Awesome. And is it fair to say that you're in the political sector? Is that an identity that you own?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I think of myself as a sort of a scholar activist. And so I find some of my work is in the classroom or at the university, and some of it is out in the community or up at the State House trying to get bills passed.
Lot going on, national
Yeah.
landscape, everything going on. So let me ask you, in between, obtaining your degrees and working in the field and being a practitioner, all these different areas that you have touch points, had anyone ever talked to you about the vicarious trauma that you would receive in these positions that you lived?
No, I don't think that was ever really a topic of discussion that I remember anyway. And that, we have always been the folks that are supposed to be there when other people need someone to rely on, and that was just sort of part of our other duties as assigned.
Yeah. Well, what do you have any opinion about what's happening with our field because we're not necessarily giving attention to the vicarious trauma?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I know a lot of people are have always felt sort of either burdened or overburdened and undertrained, undersupported in their own work as we seek to support other people, right? And I in this moment when sort of now more than ever it is, the trauma that so many people are facing, people that we deal with and interact with on a regular basis, and others that we see only through our screens, is just so pervasive at this point. It's almost very difficult to escape. I remember in the first couple months in particular, after the new Trump administration came in, just thinking like, can you please just keep all this stuff from 9 to 5 so at least I could have my evenings and
Yeah.
relax a little bit in between, because so much was happening so quickly and it was really overwhelming. And I definitely saw it in the classroom. My students are either K-12 educators or they work in higher education. And so they are dealing with their own forms of vicarious trauma, as well as the trauma, their own personal trauma.
Right.
And then I don't know, there's layers to this, right? And
Right.
so it's 6 degrees of vicarious trauma, I suppose,
No, I
that we're
totally
all
agree.
that we're all dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always talk too about the difference between PTSD, right? Like I've experienced a trauma, I was in the car accident, versus vicarious trauma, which is I'm hearing about the student, the faculty, the staff, the person that I care about and their accident. But then there's this overlap of identity work. And you can't necessarily take off your hat when you've experienced PTSD and you're doing vicarious trauma, the level of like, how do you couch your own feelings about an issue, a challenge, while serving others? Are you seeing, because I'm making some assumptions that there is no taking off your hat when you're Dr. Fernandez, you're always. So, any advice, suggestions? What have you seen worked for others?
I mean, people have all their own ways of
Yeah.
of coping. I'll say for me is I've been better lately at sort of turning things on and turning them off. So I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and when I'm with her, I'm with her. I
Mm,
don't do any work. I'm not, I don't put on the news. I'm
Mm.
watching, K-pop Demon Hunters or something else
I
instead of
just
the
got a
news.
referral for that.
Uh, it's so good. It is
Oh,
the
good.
music
I'm good.
is
I'm
amazing.
going to watch it. I just learned about that. That's so interesting.
You don't need a kid to watch this show, by the way.
Right.
You just watch it. It's so good. Yeah. But that's my way of just saying like I'm gonna take this time and just be with her and focus my energies there and not on all the other things, which I think
Mhm.
has been honestly really, really good for me. Before her, I would just be in it
Yep.
24/7 all the time and not
Mhm.
take those necessary breaks. Other people are better about that. Other people are better about turning off their notifications, which I do a lot more now,
Mhm.
about disconnecting entirely from social and email and stuff like that when you're not at work, for instance. And at the same time, I do think that especially people that are drawn to fields like in education also feel a commitment, sometimes a nagging commitment to be there for others. And it's
Right.
just, as much as we might say, oh, we've got all this work to do, and then this additional work that we do, and we know that depending on our positionality, women, people of color, queer people, etc., have all this additional layers of work that they do. It also is a bit of a calling for us as well, right?
Mhm.
So there's a balance here, not totally saying, we don't want all this additional work of being there for other people, because there's an understanding that that's part of why we went into this in the first place.
Right.
So figuring out the balance, people are going to find their own ways to cope, or some people read, some people go walk on the beach, take vacations, whatever. I'll see you all on Instagram, which are fun vacations, good for you. People find their ways to do it,
Yeah.
and refresh and recuperate. Yeah.
It's really important. We have so many colleagues. I'm sure you can name some of the few and some others that were burnt out and left, or, said, this is no longer for me, and did transitions. And I think what was important for me was when I learned about vicarious trauma and I was doing my research, I learned that the theory that grounds constructivist self-development is essentially the idea that when we started the position that we worked, we would change who we are at the end of it because of the lived examples and situations that we went through. I never thought, like, I knew when I first became a hall director, I was going to evolve, right? But like, I never knew that 30 years from then or whatever, 25 years that we've been in the field, that how I parent will be different because of the things I've heard through the lived experiences from others, right? I never thought that. But as I share that with you, do you feel like that is resonating, that maybe subconsciously or consciously you've made parenting decisions that maybe, you 20 years ago might not have thought about because of what we do for a living?
Yeah, I think now in the long term, like I know it's a long game, and
Yeah.
that the way that I parent is set up for the future. It's
Mhm.
about making sure that the most important thing for me is to have and maintain a strong relationship with my kid. So that when she needs me, she feels like she can come to me.
Yeah.
And when she needs support, she knows that I'm going to be reliably be there. And I think that over many years working in the field, I think I've come to the conclusion that that's the best way to support just other people, whether it's colleagues or whether it's
Mhm.
it's our students or whomever, is being reliable and being someone that will um, folks won't always need you, but when they do, knowing that you're going to be there, and focusing on listening, not solving people's problems, but listening to what they have to say, offering advice when it's welcome, those kinds of things. I think that's that, it's taken a bit of a time to get there to figure
Mhm.
out what the right approach was.
Right.
I'll say the other thing for me is early on in my career, I didn't talk about my personal life at all. Like I just was
Mhm.
like, that's me. I work here and I'm here you can tell me of all your stuff, but you're not ever going to hear mine.
Yeah.
And as I started to sort of like chip away at that, and just become, not my work self and my home self, but just myself,
Mm,
I felt like I began to make better, stronger connections with everybody.
right.
Once I was just willing to be myself and who I was. Of course, it takes time to be comfortable in particularly in work environments, especially depending on how you racialize or other identities that you hold. And I think it took time for me to be willing to be my whole self wherever I show up. And there's a cost to that sometimes, but I think I'm a much better professional and I'm a much better person outside of work, because I do that.
Yeah, I love that you're reflecting on that. I recently did a vicarious trauma workshop for a group of social workers that are in the nonprofit sector for domestic violence. And one of the attendees said that when she is with her children at like a playground, she is incapable of not looking at the dynamics around her and constantly
Mhm.
looking with that lens of like, is anyone hurt? Is anybody need anything? Like she's constantly assessing. And I was trying to validate that for her and say it's very difficult to turn that off. No different than law enforcement is constantly looking for like exits in a space or, all these other practitioners, they learn because this is what they do for a living, right? I find myself doing that with like my kids all the time. And it's like, oh, am I on mom duty or like work duty? Because the two sometimes interact and sometimes, not always for the good. I also will say that one of my daughter's first words were consent, and her
Well,
daycare was like, it's a little early for that. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's so I think that the way that we parent is like definitely learned from some of the things we see. And I don't think a lot of people understand that that's the vicarious trauma in a good way. It's not all bad stuff, right? Um,
right.
Is there anything that like, what advice would you give to your younger self about going into this field and doing this work to have the longevity that you have now? What would you have told yourself back then?
I think to see the long view, it can be hard sometimes, like, especially in um feels like unprecedented times is just now times, right? It's just
Yeah,
like we just
right.
live unprecedented times. And so it can be difficult to see past what's happening in the moment. But I always talk about historically when we talk about I teach courses like diversity and justice in education and school segregation and stuff like that. We had school segregation then, we have it now today. But taking the long view about what it really takes to make change, whether it is a policy change or change within ourselves, that these things do take time. I think is really important because it can be difficult to see beyond the difficulty of a moment that we're in.
Mm,
And so to understand that we are along this continuum of people that came before us and people that will come after us. I also try to see zoom out a little bit,
mm,
and really see the big picture being we are these people who are in this particular place on this planet for a short time. Why we're here, we don't exactly know. Some people have some ideas about that or ideas about what happens after we're gone from this place. But all we know is we got a limited time. We try to make the best use of our time. We try to hopefully be the best people we can be for ourselves and others. And then we find professions or callings or whatever it is that sort of animate our spirit and hopefully do good for other people. And that's the best we can do. And whatever else is bigger or beyond us. I don't know that anyone can really definitively say. And so why not just spend the time that we have with people we care about? Making the best use of our talents, developing ourselves and helping other people develop. And wouldn't that just be a good way to leave a mark, to say that we were here, and to think about the folks that come after us as hopefully people that came before us thought about the kind of world that we would live in. I think that's the best possible thing we can do, honestly.
yeah.
And so when you sort of pull back and look at where we are right now, despite all of the I say that knowingly in the context of an environment where people are like literally being abducted, where many people in the world are living in the condition of war, and all other kinds of just craziness going on around us. Is that, sort of having that center of like, we've got the challenge before us is to find a way for us um, to really be our best selves and to find a way to live with others who hopefully are trying to do the same thing. And so that's the sort of the approach I take when I see my students in class. That's how I think of them,
Yeah.
as people that are sort of on a sort of pit stop in a journey, and how I help them along the way, to the next place, knowing that our lives are going to be filled with joy and also challenge at the same time.
Yeah, there's so many people that will be able to breathe easier because you've said this and you've spoken that into the world, and they were like, I needed to hear that message today. But also, I think that you're giving a different perspective of people who are feeling that struggle and that sadness and that despair, and giving some sense of hope, on this idea that this current time is temporary, and that temporariness might be 3 years. It might be more, we don't, but we know that things, higher ed is a pendulum, and we've pivoted before, and education in
Great.
general has, right? And so I think utilizing those support systems and being able to check in with ourselves and others for that support is very powerful. So I couldn't have scripted this better. It's like one of those reality shows that like it just the realness of what you're sharing is better than anything I could have written. So I appreciate that. Um,
Exactly.
every episode I'm ending asking the speaker, if you had to spill the beans and give one word or one phrase to leave us with, what would that be for you?
Mm. I think joyful resistance. I'm just a huge believer in joyful resistance, that we have the ability to fight against things that we think are wrong, but to do it joyfully, and to that there is they say there's beauty in the struggle. I've found some of my closest friends fighting
Mm.
for educational equity and for policies that we believe in. And if it wasn't for those struggles, I might not have found those people. And so I just deeply believe in joyful resistance, and that regardless of what people throw our way, they can't steal our sunshine unless we let them. So there you go.
Thank you so much for joining on today's episode of Spill the Beans. See you next time. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining for today's episode of Spill the Beans. I am hoping that you were able to resonate a little bit with this idea that Raul gave us about joyful resistance. And he also said there's beauty in the struggle. And one of the things that it reminded me of was Stephen Colbert was recently on an interview, and quoted some others and saying that what punishments of God are not also gifts. And so I don't want to show my bias of spirituality or anything like that, but I think perspective is very interesting at these times. And when you're in those moments of a hard day at work and you're feeling helpless, hopeless, struggled, feeling burnt out, feeling questioning if you should stay in the field, I would love for you to rewatch this particular episode, because I think what you're hearing, at least from my experience, is what I'm taking away from it is that there are going to be some bad days at work because we don't have control and power over everything. And in those moments, you need the solidarity of friends and family. And in this particular situation, I was able to talk to a colleague about parenting and what that gives us, and the joyful moments in that. They're not always joyful, but the moments that we have. Um, and I do think that it's times like this for us to remember that if this is a passion that you have, the job that you're doing, I want you to remember that there is times of struggles. It's temporary. It's not forever. And that, as he mentioned, there is joy in the resistance, and that we're very realistic that there's going to be those days where you have really difficult cases, difficult parents, difficult students, politics, budgets, emails. I can go on and on and on. And when those moments happen, remember to take care of yourself, take a beat. Don't ever make a big decision when you're exhausted, tired, and hungry. And always look for the moments that you can really be appreciative of the struggle that you are persevering. So I hope that's helpful for you. As always, take care.